Well, hello again, and welcome to day three of the 17th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment virtual conference. I'm Bob Ailes. I'm your moderator. We have with us Todd Prim, who is an ACUE certified professor. What does ACUE stand for?
Good question. The Association of College and University Educators. It's a
Oh,
national program.
well, okay. Well, good job. Clarified. He's a professor in the Department of Biological Sciences at Sam Houston State University, who has a really good football team, right?
We do.
Yeah,
National champ 2 years ago.
yeah. He recently completed an engaged learning fellowship, which serves as a basis for this session, and previously served as director for the Teaching and Learning Center at Sam Houston State. His colleague is Tristan Smith, also an ACUE certified lecturer in the psychology and philosophy department at Sam Houston. He's currently completing a doctorate in educational psychology. So, Todd, let me turn it over to you. Take it away.
Thanks a lot, Bob. Appreciate it. Thanks for the invite. Share some of our research here. I think everybody can see my screen. So we'll start there. Um, so this uh, talk is based on research that came from what we call an engaged learning fellowship. That's a 2 year program at Sam Houston where basically the participants get some release time so they can focus on a solo project. And what we focused on was metacognition. Um, we didn't do research on metacognition itself per se, you know, neuro or psychology or anything like that. We basically looked in the literature saying that learners have, you know, they have good metacognition. We were focusing more on the practical side of how can instructors promote students to do more metacognition, basically, since we know that that does work. The earliest reference I could find, and if I'm wrong, somebody can help me out, for metacognition actually was John Flavel, a developmental psychologist in 1979 that used that term. Um, so what kind of benefit were we looking for from this project? One, that it was not focused on a particular discipline, didn't matter what you're teaching. Two, we were trying to take basically off the shelf tools that have already been developed and apply them. Three, not use an enormous amount of class time taken away from teaching the content. And four, kind of focus the responsibility for doing this mostly on the student. And that's why we had the title of minimal intervention. So metacognition is basically thinking about your thinking. More technically, it's basically monitoring your learning as you're going along and where you are. So someone with poor metacognition has no clue what they don't know. Someone with high metacognition, there's things they don't know, but they're pretty much aware of what they don't know. Therefore, they're a much more efficient and capable learner. Some background literature based on this. One, there's a really good summary study about metacognition and using it in higher ed classrooms by Kim Tanner, um, published back in CBE 2012. She runs a Science Education Partnership and Assessment Lab, or CPAL. She runs a really great group there doing tons of educational research, but she talked about student metacognition there and basically the need to teach more metacognition in class. Um, and her key phrase, she's in biology, was to teach students to, quote, think like a biologist, not just the content itself, but how to think like a biologist, which is, and a lot of great suggestions in that article. One thing also mentioned was a tool that's been developed quite a long time ago called the MAI, the Metacognition Awareness Inventory. That's a survey, a 52-item survey developed, as you can see, published in 1994. And I bring that up because in that publication in 94, they stated basically they were not aware of any studies if metacognition can be taught, someone trying to teach metacognition itself in the classroom. So we were trying to kind of meet that gap with this study. And the MAI has been used in a variety of other studies. I won't post all of them here, but additional validations and adjustments have been done on it since 1994. So basically, I didn't want to show you everything all positive because that's not really reflective of the literature. So here's one more negative finding. This is a intro psychology class in community college. You see 86 students here. These students used a tool called an exam wrapper. An exam wrapper is the idea of wrapping up after an exam. Basically, you do the exam and then you think about what study strategies you used and how effective they were. And those students used this metacognitive tool in that course, or they used a wrapper that was basically just a couple of questions about the content as a control, or neither. And in that study, at least, it wasn't affecting their grades or exam performance, or it didn't even really change their MAI score. So that was kind of interesting. So basically, not everything you do can affect it. And of course, metacognition is harder to teach than just content because it's not just information. You're actually asking for the students to change their behavior, which of course is much harder. By the way, the idea of an exam wrapper came from Marcia Lovett, first published in 2013, as far as I can find, in a book chapter. There is not that much primary literature about getting students to incorporate and improve their metacognition in class. There are a lot of really good recently published books that mention it and describe it some. Some of them I share here in case you're interested in reading more later. My two favorites out of here are Linda Nielsen's book. Linda, of course, is a legend in teaching and learning. And also Sandra McGuire's, who's recently retired from LSU, but she's huge in the student support area. So if you have any favorite resources related to this, I would encourage you to just pop them in the chat so you can share with other participants here. But anywho, let's move on to our study, what we were looking at. So what do we do? So like I said, this is supported by this Engaged Learning Fellowship. So before I really started this study officially, we did a little preliminary data. This is in one course. It's a freshman biology course. So, intro. The context here is we're a public state university. About half of our students are first gen. This, of course, is a majors course. It's a STEM course. We're not in the highly selective category, but we're also not in the open admissions category. So kind of middle of the road there. So in this course, our intervention was basically in the Blackboard, which is the LMS we use. We posted during the semester 6 times learning methods that we know work from a group called the Learning Scientists. I'll show about them in a minute. And we also posted what's called the Samford videos. I'll show those in a minute too. So it's basically showing students how to do metacognition. We also had these 2 diagnostic questions for every exam. There are 4 written exams in the course. Basically, they're estimating their grade, and they're also telling us how prepared they feel on a Likert scale or I think Likert scale, how prepared they feel for the exam. Basically, there's a publication I'll show in a minute talking about that grade estimation as a measure of metacognition. Again, the concept is if you're really highly effective at metacognition, you can estimate your exam score really well because you know how much you know. And if you're really poor at metacognition, you have no clue what you made. So your estimate's not very close to your actual score. That's where we got that idea from. Okay. And we also used, as I mentioned before, this exam wrapper after their first exam. So a little bit about our interventions. First one, there's a really awesome group of cognitive psychologists called the Learning Scientists. You can find them at learningscientist.org. These ladies are geniuses. They're great. They've examined extensively the educational psychology literature and cognition literature, and they've come up with 6 learning methods that are very strongly based on evidence, which you can see there. For each one of those, they have written descriptions of them, they have blog descriptions of them, they have podcasts that really talk about it, and they have little YouTube videos that explain it. So they gathered all these really nice resources that you can share with students to show them basically, for example, what spacing is, how you'd use it, and why we think it works. And when I've said Samford videos, that's kind of the vernacular for Stephen, probably a lot of you guys have seen Stephen Chu put on a 6-video series in YouTube where he talks extensively about effective learning, which he does mention metacognition in some of these. The beauty of these is they're fairly short and they're all very super student oriented. So really great resource. And then the exam wrappers, like I said, they've been used by a variety of different instructors. Again, the oldest reference I could find was in 2004. But basically, it's the idea, again, of reflecting on how did you study, then what you did on the exam, and then how you're going to change your study habits to do better next time. So that's our interventions, a little bit about them. So what do we see in our preliminary data? Again, this freshman biology course. One, if you look at their grade estimations, they did correlate with their exam scores. So they weren't, completely all over the place. So the students can reasonably predict their own score, okay? But if you compare the difference between their prediction and their actual grade, that mean difference did not get more accurate over time. So that would suggest they're not better across that semester of accurately estimating their grade. And this compares to a really good study published by Dang and others in Jimby in 2018. Just some introductory courses as well. And he noticed in his study that almost 70% of his students were over predicting their exam 1 score, but they got a bit better as it went across the semester. And in his study, the students who over predicted actually did worse on the exam. So that's an initial overconfidence concept called the Dunning-Kruger effect in psychology. People who are really novice at something tend to drastically overestimate their skill. So basically, our initial finding that incoming freshmen, are not super great at metacognition is not a surprise to anybody. Certainly not a surprise to the literature. We did have a slight decrease in students over predicting their exam score. We went from about 68% on exam 1. By the time they got to the end of the semester, it was about 58%. So it went down some, not quite as much as what Dang saw, but it went down some. So that kind of gave us some initial early ideas on what was going on. And we revised the study and kind of started it in, I guess, in full in several different courses. Okay. So in this one, we had again, the Blackboard announcements of the learning scientist methods, one for each method, included links to, again, they could read or listen or view a video of how that method works and how to implement it. And mention those in class. We also had the choose videos available. Okay. We expanded to 3 different diagnostic questions on each exam. Based on the literature, we added one about basically their exam anxiety, again on a Likert scale. And then we came up with kind of a pre-post measurement. So after exam 1, we did a wrapper. We put the wrapper in Qualtrics. Then we did our intervention, all of our interventions. And then after exam 3, we repeated the same wrapper so we could kind of compare scores and everything and see what was going on. So what do we see here? First, one thing to note, this course is pretty different. Our preliminary data came from an intro freshman course. This is a senior level elective majors course. So that's a bit of a different environment. It's kind of the opposite spectrum, if you will. Although students pick this class so they want to be there. And it's pretty intense course, pretty complex content. So what do we see here? What we saw here, one piece of good news is that their anxiety decreased across the semester. You note their anxiety started pretty high, self-reported, but on the 10-point Likert scale started out as a mean of 8. So it's pretty high. It's probably because, again, this course is pretty intense and the buzz among the students is that it is quite challenging. So although it did go down some, the effect size, according to Cohen's, is medium, and the decrease was significant. So that was nice to see. The metacognition measurement, again, that you compare their grade with what they predict their grade is. Again, we found the same thing as the preliminary. It did not decline across the semester. So their predictions were not getting more accurate. You notice the number of students that were over predicting their exam score went down slightly. Although you'll notice the percent over predictors here was much less than before. In the freshman class, it started basically about 70% of them over predicting. Here, the senior level class, it's only 45% when you start, which kind of suggests that experienced college students with a lot more hours under the belt don't over predict as much. What about the preparation scores? The preparation scores pretty much stayed flat. They were in the 6s on the scale, 6.5, 6.4, 6.8, somewhere around there, and stayed pretty much flat and didn't change. Although when we looked at their report on how prepared they were and compared that to their actual grade, those didn't correlate. So some of them thought they're well prepared and scored well, and some of them thought they're well prepared and didn't score well. So their estimation of how prepared they are seems to be fairly independent from what they actually score, in contrast to their actual exam grade prediction, which is kind of interesting. I don't show it here, but in a minute I'm going to show you on the exam wrapper. We ask them the study time, and the amount of time they spent studying per exam actually increased across the semester, which is interesting. The mean was about 7.9 hours, and it went up to 10.2. What's interesting there is we never advised them to study longer. We advised them to change how they were studying, but not studying longer. So that's kind of interesting. Although maybe thinking about their studying skills and everything made them study longer. Not sure. Um, so another course, comparison course that we ran, same semester. This is a junior level majors required course, but in a different discipline, not biology, now in psychology. Both these courses face to face. So this is a disciplinary comparison here. Notice this found the same thing. So now we have 3 different classes where the predictions don't get more accurate over time. That seems to be consistent. Although this time the anxiety did not go down. Although the initial anxiety score was a bit lower. So they're less anxious about this class when they start. Doesn't go down though. Over predictors were even a bit lower than the immunology class, but didn't decline at all. So again, you're comparing across majors here, so that's a major confounding factor. So I don't know how much we conclude with that, but it's kind of interesting. So let's look at the exam wrapper itself. Here's some example screenshots from our Qualtrics for our exam wrapper. What I want you to focus on mainly here, highlighted with the blue box, is our question that's trying to gauge what their study strategies that they're using. And what they're going to do is they're going to basically give a percent number to each one of those study strategies, and it's going to total up to 100. So they're basically telling us what strategies they're using when they're studying, right? And we put all these study strategies in here specifically to try to figure out study strategies that the evidence says don't work too well, like rereading the book, which doesn't help memory very much, or rereading a PowerPoint, or highlighting in the book or something like that, or highlighting notes, versus study strategies that do have evidence that work well, like some of these here, which are, like flashcards, which is a retrieval practice method, yeah, or being quizzed by another person, which is retrieval practice, or explaining content to someone else, that's elaboration, right? Or sketching diagrams or things, that's dual coding. So basically, we're trying to measure if we're using some strategies that align to the learning methods that have been identified by the learning scientist. So basically, what did we see? Okay, first, that senior level biology class. In blue here is the total number for the students, the pretest. So that's right after exam 1, before the intervention. And in orange here is after the 3rd exam, so after the intervention. You can notice that the strategies that don't align with evidence very well, like rereading and highlighting notes, went down some. And some of the strategies that align with the evidence went up some, like their use of discussion or the sketching or teaching their friend or something like that. So that was a bit encouraging. Okay. Preliminary, obviously, but a bit encouraging. I think in the future, we want to vary and see if really focusing on one method is more useful than mentioning all 6, right? So are you scattering them? We also want to see basically saturation analysis. We want to see how much is too much. Like if you show a method as a video and you also explain it in class and you also practice it and things like that, when are you getting diminishing returns? Or if having them practicing a method is much more effective than just having them learn about a method, like view a method. So basically going to play around with the intervention to see if we can dial it up or dial it down. So that's the one class, the senior biology class. What about that junior level psychology class? Here's that junior level psychology class, and fairly consistent. Again, that some of the less effective ones went down, highlighting and rereading, and some of the more effective ones, like teaching your friend, which they weren't using at all before, went up. You'll notice here, though, the one that really went up a lot was quizzing yourself. And that's interesting because when we debriefed and talked about it, the psychology instructor said what they did is actually in class, they actually mentioned retrieval practice, how good retrieval practice is, how we know retrieval practice works, and strongly recommended students use retrieval practice, including quizzing themselves. So this suggests to us that maybe the instructor themselves accentuating the intervention a lot more than just giving them resources in Blackboard may encourage them to use it more, possibly. We're going to have to test that, but that's possible. One thing we didn't expect to see that we saw in both instances was that the students reading the textbook went down some. We need to kind of retest and be sure that effect is real. We were trying to discriminate between reading the textbook the first time versus rereading the book over and over. Because reading the book the first time is really useful. We don't want to discourage that. It's rereading a book over and over, which doesn't help memory very much and makes you feel falsely familiar. So we're going to reword some questions and things and see if we can precisely tell, because we don't want to make them read the book less. That's not a good thing. We also did a comparison with an online course. So this is a matching section of that junior psychology class. The other one was face-to-face. This one is online. So what's the difference between face-to-face and online? There was not a large difference. Actually, the results were fairly similar, consistent between the face-to-face and the online versions of that psychology course. One thing that was very different was the online class. The percent of students who overpredicted their exam score was a lot less. But again, we're comparing online versus face-to-face. The online students are a different cohort here because they self-selecting the online class. So maybe, they're more confident of their performance. They're more comfortable in the online environment already, which is why they picked the class. We're not sure exactly. When you do educational research, the environment's a bit complicated. You're dealing with people. So I'm a microbiologist. I kind of like to be able to control all the conditions, which you can't do when you're doing this kind of research because it's basically sociology. So you have to learn what you can learn and do the best you can. So what about the exam wrapper from the online? And again, it showed fairly consistent with the face-to-face. Although you'll notice, unlike the face-to-face psychology where they dramatically increased their use of self-quizzing, in the online, it only slightly went up. That actually kind of supports our idea that maybe the instructor in class mentioning retrieval practice and how important it is what encouraged them to do it, because the instructor didn't do it in this online class because he wasn't lecturing to them, so he didn't present it to them. So that's kind of interesting. And definitely need to go look at that more in the future. Okay, kind of, if you got a little lost there with all these graphs, so key findings where we had here were that our really small interventions, pretty straightforward small interventions, could decrease the students' self-reported test anxiety score and could increase their self-reported use of the evidence-based learning strategies. So a promising start. Obviously a lot more to be done, but a promising start. We followed this up with a course after the project, another version of that freshman biology class. And again, found very consistent results. So that's good. We need to expand in the future. Again, we want to look at adding more to the intervention, including having students actually practice some of these skills inside and outside of class. So basically asking the question, if they do some exercises, is that more effective than them just being exposed to the information and viewing the videos and things. Because again, we're trying to do a behavior change here, and that's much harder than them just learning something. We also want to look more at the online compared to face-to-face courses to see how you need to alter the interventions to work the best in each one of those two environments. We also want to do a little research to question this idea, if them predicting their exam score, is that really a good measure of metacognition or not? Maybe not. And see if that actually correlates with their actual knowledge and performance. So, mentioning retrieval practice, that's one of the methods that's really good. I wanted to share this. This is a slide made by Pooja Agarwal. She's basically the guru of retrieval practice. And this is a bunch of really good resources that she recommends that includes retrieval practice and talks about it and explains it, how that teachers and students can incorporate and use more of it. Really, teaching and learning in the past 15 years has had a bit of a renaissance. I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but that's great. A lot of excellent work done in it, a lot of good resources released on it. So I wanted to get a little input from all of you guys. Something I call a live chat, which I actually just got from Christine Harrington's talk, which I think was 10 a.m. today. She's awesome, by the way. Where we reflect a little, because you don't learn by doing things, you learn by reflecting on what you did. Okay. And the reflection I want you guys to think about is, what tools or strategies do you guys use to either increase student metacognition in your class or improve their study skills? Or if you don't have one clearly in mind, what one would you like to try in the future? And if you could please share that with everybody else in the chat. I'll give you a minute to do that. Okay, I see Top Hat. Yeah. I haven't used that, but actually my collaborator who's in here, Tristan Smith, the psychologist, he uses Top Hat quite extensively in several of his classes, so you guys may be able to share ideas on that. Your tutorials, a little bit more about the tutorials. How do you do them? Where do you get them from?
Thanks for asking, Todd. We have a statewide project in California that facilitates online enrollment between our community colleges, and that statewide project included student services and student preparation. So they created a great series of tutorial videos that basically itself, the title is obviously what it is. It helps students learn how to be successful online learners. And we make that available through a self-enroll course that we link from our college website. And those of us that teach online are encouraged, so I encourage the other faculty to share those links with the students. And we have data from our students to show that they actually do make a difference. The ones who completed those tutorials succeed in their online courses at a higher rate than the students who don't.
Great, good stuff. It's a good idea. And I like that. That doesn't take a lot of time out of your class. Yeah, that's a major concern, especially that STEM faculty have. That they're concerned about losing any of their class time. Good, okay. Another reflection I had was your biggest takeaway, if you want to share that from this session? Or, of course, any questions that you have about what we did or how we did it or why we did it or anything. Happy to entertain any of those. You can either turn on your audio and ask the question, or you can pop it in the chat, whatever you prefer. Learning scientists are great. One of them came keynote for our teaching and learning conference here. We do a annual university-wide teaching and learning conference to kick off the fall. And one of them was our keynote several years back. Excellent job. Yeah, they have great resources. They really do good stuff. Problem I share with students is you just Google how to study or use, now ChatGPT or something like that to tell you how to study. There's tons of it, no shortage of advice, but a lot of that advice is not based on evidence. It's just basically people parroting what works for me. So the thing I love about the learning scientists is, it's strongly evidence-based suggestions. Learning that generally retrieval practice works for everybody, not just for one particular person and their style. And a lot of the advice on the internet is, stuff like, I study with, piano music in the background. It's things that probably aren't making a significant effect on learning at all. It's just what makes them comfortable. So they are really great resources. Okay, so yeah, my collaborator says he gives a little extra credit to students for working through some of the learning scientist resources. That's something else we want to play with in our research in the future, is you just present resources, or you present resources and connect it to some extra credit or something like that. Try to integrate it into the class more to see if that's encouraging the students to use it. Because of course, the students we want to encourage to change their learning strategies are typically the ones who are not that interested in it. It's the chicken and egg issue. So, just like, the students who really don't need office hours are the ones who usually show up to office hours. So we're going to try to strategize how to help the students who really need to improve their study strategies. Lots about that in Sandra McGuire's book too. A lot of work in student success she did at LSU. All right, I don't see any other questions or everything, so thanks everybody. Looks like we're good. Bob?
Well, great. I think people got a lot out of this, so I appreciate you taking time to do it.
Great. It's good. Thanks for the invite.
That's right. Yeah, glad to have you, and yeah, maybe we'll get you back again sometime.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, top of the hour. We've got one more session to go today, so hope to see you all there.
Great.